Hey everybody, Janice Nolan. I'm here today to start talking about how do you put basically an offer together when you're representing a buyer. So it is the buyer's checklist. So until you become more familiar, it is always a good idea to pull this checklist in order to go to Forms or Us and put your packet together. Also, always remember in Forms or Us, save as you go. It could be a simple edit and you have to start from the beginning if you don't save those files. So make sure you do that. Okay, so let's just keep it really, really brief on the checklist. We're going to go into deeper dives on all these things and the individual forms, and also in the sales contract, writing a contract, writing an offer process. So you're going to hear this information over and over and over, maybe in different ways. But this is a great way to start because most agents, a majority of agents, let's put it that way, start with buyers. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is the Missouri broker disclosure. The reason why I ask for this, not all brokers do, is I think it's important for an agent to be able to prove that they have the agency conversation prior to taking any, of course, personal information or entering into any type of contract. What we do is we have the buyer initial what agency, let's for example, buyer agency, they'll initial next to that paragraph and also sign the form as a whole. In the perfect world, I love to see them dated as well. Very easy thing to do on DocuSign. Okay, so let's go on to number 2, buyer agency contract. When you're representing a buyer as a client, and this is going to be shared and disclosed in all kinds of situations, you have to verify that and then have the buyer agency contract conversation prior to putting somebody in your car, prior to writing your first offer. They will be in the midst of negotiation brain and not be listening really to the details about the buyer agency contract. So a couple of these things I will suggest. Number one, this one, to have in that so important buyer consult interview before you do anything. Perfect world is you have a buyer opportunity, you invite them to for Panera, sit at a table, you go to their house, you sit in the conference room at the office. Bottom line is you want to be in a comfortable situation so you can explain all the steps and all the processes of what it means to buy a home. There's so many things. And I know some of you just got out of real estate school. I can imagine, or you can imagine what a buyer feels. I mean, and you went to school. So we want to make sure that they're comfortable with the process. Again, buyer consult, can't say it enough times. Better prepare up front than have to troubleshoot in the middle of a transaction, God forbid the negotiations. So third is letter from your lender, pre-approval or proof of funds. Again, this is something that you're going to collect during the buyer consult, document it. You're going to have to send them off with your offers. And what better opportunity than to discuss with your buyer realistic goals, what price range, timeline, because a pre-approval or a pre-call has to be redone every 30 days. You need to go through these fine details to know payment, to know if they're comfortable with the interest rate. Do they know that they have to come up with closing costs? So the fact that these are on the checklist helps you segue into having those conversations with the buyer, because you got to have them. Earnest money and receipt. On the front of the contract, of course, you will write down what amount your earnest money will be for that particular offer. Most people like to see a 1% earnest money, We will go into that more with negotiations because it does play a part in it. But for the sake of the checklist and paperwork, we need a copy of the earnest money, check, money order. Is it made out to the appropriate title company? Also, too, you're going to either drop that earnest money off, or you're going to have your buyer drop it off. Or worst case scenario, which I really don't like to see happen a lot, but you can't avoid it sometimes, is actually mailing the earnest check. And then lately, and it's becoming more and more popular, is some title companies will allow electronic deposits. So that's something that we'll look at, that's offered by Maris as one of our services for our fees that we pay every year. Okay, so let's see, what do we have next? Number 5 is the MLS printout. I like these because it's almost like an agreement between what the seller is saying and advertising, keyword advertising, and what the buyer is understanding. Also, your commissions. It takes a listing agent 2 seconds to change a commission payout in on the MLS. So it's always good to make sure that you make that part of the contract. Again, that's my preference. Not all brokers require that. But what I like to see is when you're writing the offer, you check the box other and you pull the MLS sheet dated March 5th, 2023 at 3:15 p.m. You have everybody involved initial it. We're all acknowledging that's what's being advertised. That's what the seller is saying he's selling, and that's what the buyer is saying they're buying. Now, that does not stop you from adding it at different places in the contract. So, which we'll talk about that a little bit more later. That's why, I mean, I can go on and on about why I like it. It's verify commission is probably the best one. Let's see, sales contract and counter offers, all the counter offers, not just the last one. All the counter offers. The MREC likes to see how you got to that number. So we need them all. And also, you need to number the counter offers at the bottom. Don't forget that. It's really easy to do. Appraisal writer for conventional loans, FHA, and VA. Again, we'll go through each one of these writers, and sometimes you'll learn that you'll use both on one transaction, and I'll explain that later. But an appraisal writer usually is for a conventional loan, FHA for FHA loan, and of course a VA for a VA loan. So that just attests to value and then some. VA, for instance, requires the seller to have a termite inspection. But again, we'll talk about that later when we talk about negotiations and contract forms. Title work order and survey, that's actually just giving the title company permission to order title work, do the research on your buyer, and also if they want a survey, and then they will order that on their behalf. If you do have a preference of a certain survey company, make sure your title company knows that. If not, they'll use their preferred. Inspection notice, probably one of the most dreaded paragraphs in all the sales contract. There's the seller's point of view, there's buyer's point of view. We're going to spend a lot of time on an inspection notice. Basically, it's the form that the buyer and seller both have to acknowledge and sign, that sometimes the buyer is happy and they're not going to ask any repairs. Sometimes they are. All that's documented on the notice. We always require supporting documentation with that, being the 25 to 30 page inspection report, be it a septic and well, sewer, lateral, anything and everything that pertains to that inspection of that property must be uploaded. We're going to talk about how all that works later. Okay, we're on and number 12, preliminary ALTA. That is hopefully received to you, the buyer's agent, 24 to 48 hours prior from the title company. It is the balance sheet per se of that transaction, meaning the lender communicated with the title company. The title company did their own fees as well, along with subdivision, trustee, recording, all kinds of things go on those preliminary altas. Get familiar, get comfortable with those. It is recommended that you go through that with your buyer and ask them if they have any questions or concerns. The last thing you want to do is always rely on your lender or wait to the day of closing and you're sitting at the closing table. No surprises. You don't want any surprises. So again, we'll talk about that in more detail. Commission disbursements is a form that I put together as the broker, and it helps me better understand what your expectation is of the commission the company is going to receive. So we'll put transaction fees on there. If you have any administration fees that you charge the client, referrals, just anything that explains the money portion of it. Sometimes I have to correct those, and my corrected version will be uploaded in the final closing packet on Paperless Pipeline. Okay, this is one that just happened to me recently. Verify that the listing agent closed out the property on Maris in your name. Double check that. I try my best to double check it as well, but it is a real hassle if that has to be changed. And sometimes people just don't catch it. And it really needs to be noted with the proper information, closing cost and repairs, all those kind of things. Okay. Of course, request for a testimonial and share on social media. You know, the testimonial doesn't have to always be from the client. It could be from the lender. It can actually even be from another agent. I've had that happen. One of the things of Select's culture is we want to be team players. Team players with each other, and team players with affiliates, and team players especially with our other competitive. Now here I say team players and I'm using the word competitive. Other realtors from other brokerages. We want to be known as putting the client's needs first above. Sometimes you'll meet some real ego, and always, we never want to lead that. We always want to be professional and caring. Okay. If you ever do have any issues with any agents, please let me know immediately. I'll handle that as your broker. Also, and then the final closing packet. Yay! Everything went to closing. I will either receive the check, you can bring it in, or I'll get it FedEx, or it can be mailed to me. Check in, and if it is being mailed, always make sure addresses are even, well, FedEx as well. You know, we did have a recent move. Make sure that's your responsibility to reach out to that title company and make sure they have the accurate information along with the accurate suite number. Okay, big deal. That building is huge that we're in, and we do not want to be tracking that down. So back to the final closing packet. You closed. I received the check. I'm going to take a copy of that check that the title company sent to us. Also, I will have both copies of the Altas, seller side, buyer side. And also, I do take a copy of the commission disbursement and the copy of the check that I wrote out to you. That is the final closing packet. I scan it, I upload it to the Paperless Pipeline so you can have the documentation along with the company. So that's it. Pretty simple, huh? Make sure you pull this. You'll find this form on reference. Thanks so much.